Good day to you. I want to believe this recording meets you in good condition. My name is Adeboyega Adebobola. I'm an IELTS facilitator at Examplanet Services. This recording is an overview of the listening section of the IELTS, as well as certain tips that would assist you in getting your required score band for the purpose for which you're doing this exam. The IELTS listening section is always a very intriguing aspect, and this is because it is the only aspect that you do not really have any form of control over your time or pace. Okay, what does that truly mean? For the reading aspect, if you're more familiar with the multiple choice question than matching heading questions, you might decide to start with what you're familiar with. But for the listening aspect of the IELTS, you don't really have any form of control. You have to always go at the pace of the recording, which actually tells you that you have to pay extreme attention as the tape is being played. The IELTS actually comprises of 4 parts, and you actually have one recording for each part. It takes about 6 minutes in total for each recording. And you have to also note that the parts become increasingly more difficult as you progress. That means in essence that the easiest you always see there will most likely be questions 1 to 10. Because 11 to 20 will be a little bit more difficult than that, and the others will be also more difficult than the previous one. You should also note that you will always have 10 minutes to write out your answers after the tape finishes playing, so make sure you write it down properly. The part 1 of the IELTS listening test is a conversation between 2 people on a non-academic topic. The passage always revolves around transactional purposes. For instance, it might be about travel, hotel, insurance, and it often assesses candidate skills in identifying letters of the alphabets or numbers. Also, specific information that are basic are often asked. For instance, you could be asked about names, age, phone number, costs, and things like that. And you must take very good notes that just like the other sessions, answers are usually in a hierarchical order. That is, the answer to question 1 will always be before you get the answer to question 2. You will never hear the answer to question 2 before you hear question 1. The part 2 of the IELTS listening test is about a single speaker talking about a non-academic topic. This is often a monologue relating to general social needs. It could be information about the community events, and it also often involves descriptions and explanations. More often than not, it contains a map or diagram, and candidates are actually expected to locate positions or labels or label parts on the map. You must take very good notes of the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west, because they could prove very vital on how you locate certain answers. The part 3 is a conversation between 2 or more people about an academic topic. It usually contains difficult aspects of listening, like multiple choices. And you must realize that multiple choices could just be a little more difficult because you have to read sentences, not just words. Your ability to actually note that could prove very vital. You have to also note that the different speakers are usually identifiable by their voices. That is, if they are male or female, if it's a teacher or student, and the likes. The last part of the IELTS listening test, which is the fourth one, is a single speaker discussing an academic issue. The lecture often proceeds from the beginning to the end without a break. The relationship between the lecture and the questions is one of synonyms and paraphrases. So you should take very good note of certain words and listen carefully for the synonyms of those words. That will be the correct prompts to the answers. Let's now come to the question types we have for the IELTS listening part and the tips for those kind of questions. The first question type you're looking at is a multiple choice question. Arguably, it's the most difficult kind of questions you'll come across. And this is simple because you actually have sentences to deal with. And so how easy it is for you to read those sentences before you actually hear the prompts for the next question is vital to you getting it. But there are a few things that could actually serve as good tips for you to get it. First is actually whenever the answers are so similar or actually have certain words for every single of the three choices, you must learn to highlight the differences. But a very good key is to know what exactly is not said. You must know what is not said, what is really said, and perhaps what you just mentioned in passing. Another thing you have to do is that you have to think of parallel expressions. You have to take note of certain paraphrases of some of the answers in your question, because you wouldn't always hear it directly the way it's said in the recording. You must take very good note that all the options may be mentioned, but being mentioned does not actually mean that it is the correct answer. Perhaps it was mentioned to say it is not really the answer. Another kind of questions we come across for the IELTS listening test is the short answers. And one of the very good tips that will help you get such an answer is that you have to look at the question word being used. For example, does it start with what? Does it start with when? Or does it start with how? Of course, if it's about when, you know that what you're trying to listen for should be something that relates to time. And if it is about how, you know what you're trying to listen for is about the method that was used and things like that. So the question word being used for a short answer actually serve as a guide to what you have to listen to get the answer to such a question. Another question type that is very typical of IELTS test is labeling of diagrams. Some students normally find this a little difficult because some of the diagrams might be a little unfamiliar to them. But the first thing you have to realize is that the answers to labeling of diagrams will always come in an orderly form. What does that really mean? It means in essence, you will always hear the answer to question 12 before question 13. And that should always guide you. That however the diagram is, you will always be rest assured that the prompt to question 12 will always come before the prompt to question 13. So that helps you to focus more on the earlier questions than the subsequent ones. those diagrams. It's always very usual that for IELTS listening tests, we see tables completion. One of the tips that will also help you for the table completion is that you have to check the information given and predict the answer type to listen for. For instance, is it about a place? Is it about, does a column refer to places, time, date, or cost? You have to always know that the questions are arranged in rows. So we have to check it one column after the other. You have to always check everything you have on a particular row before you go to the next one. Another question type you have for the IELTS listening test is matching and classifying information. How do you match information? You must always understand the relationship that exists between ideas, because it will test your ability to understand rephrased sentences as well as key points in the recording. You must always make sure you understand the relationship that exists between ideas. Is it a synonym of another word? Is it a paraphrase of it? And things like that. Always look at the word you are being asked to match with something else, so as to know what exactly did I hear about this. What can I relate to this particular option? But apart from those popular or usual question types that we see on the IELTS, there are other essential tips that ensures or that actually help you get, that could help you get a very good score for the IELTS listening test. The first one is you must make sure that you do not exceed the word or the number limits. For example, if you are asked to actually give a word, if you give 2 words, even if the ones you chose is a part of what you actually heard, but because you exceeded the number of words you are asked to actually give, it will be marked wrong. You must also make sure that when you are asked to give a letter, you don't write a word. Those are essential information. You must also make sure that you're prepared for different accents. So while preparing, you must make sure you just don't listen to perhaps BBC alone. You might also watch movies or interviews that reflect other accents apart from the British English, where it could be American, just any other native accents will do. Another essential tip that could ensure you do pretty well for your IELTS listening section, or test rather, is that you must always ensure you listen whenever speakers correct themselves. Whatever they say next would always be the correct one. For instance, you could hear somebody say, I live at number 16, Winlow Street. Oh, sorry, I used to live there, but now I live on number 17. Whatever the person actually says last would always be the correct version. And I think the most important of all the tips that could help you get a very good score for your IELTS listening test is that you must always ensure that you read the next set of questions after answering each question. Why is that? Because that helps you to actually look out for what exactly am I looking out for this record, from this recording. Because you have to know that you could hear number 1 answer, and in a few seconds you might actually hear number 2. And on the other hand, you may hear number 1 answer, and in a minute you might not have heard number 2. But the only thing that actually helps you stay focused and in check is when you've read the subsequent question. It definitely helps you to know that, okay, this is exactly what I'm looking out for, by looking at the keywords in the next set of questions.